Good afternoon. It's now the afternoon. Good afternoon, and a very, very warm welcome. Lovely to be here with you today. And we're just going to give it a couple of minutes whilst people are joining. Please do say hello in chat. I hope you've had a lovely morning so far, and that your day's going well. So very, very, very lovely indeed to be here with all of you on this beautiful day. Lovely to have you here, and I'm really, really looking forward to sharing lots and lots of wisdom with you all, and very much looking forward to getting to know you all a little bit better as well. Great to see you all. Lovely to have you joining us today. So just going to give it a minute. My morning has been great so far. I had a fantastic morning, and I'm here with Lydia today. Lydia heads up our Dubai practice here at C&C Search, and she's going to be asking me a few questions at the end. So please do feel free to share any questions that you've got in the Q&A box or in the chat today, and Lydia will make sure that we answer those for you at the end of the session. So a very, very, very warm welcome. As I mentioned, I know that I can see some of you have just joined. We're just giving it a minute or so just to allow people to hop on over to their Zoom and to join us. But very, very, very nice to be able to start to get to know our Dubai clients better, and also to start adding value to you all, and for you to get to know us a little bit better as well, and hopefully start to forge some good relationships with you all, which is what we're here to do. So I think we're going to get going. I think we'll get started, and we'll start today by my introducing myself, and you can get to know Lydia a little bit more at the end of today's session. So who on earth am I? Well, I am Lucy Chamberlain, and if you were in the London market, you probably know me very well. I've been in recruitment now for about 24 years. I set up C&C Search about 9 years ago now, and I set up C&C Academy 5 years ago. We've trained over 5,000 students, and we have looked after numerous clients globally in their training needs. On the recruitment side, we have a HR practice, marketing practice, and as well as support staff practice, which is the area that Lydia heads up for us. I have probably interviewed about 27,000 people, we think, over the last 24 years. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I started to really want to have a much greater understanding about the psychology of interviews, but also a deeper understanding of the process, how to get the best out of interviews, and also to understand why so many people perform well on interview. Everybody thinks they're great, then they get into the role itself, and there's a huge mismatch. And I'm here to eliminate the vast majority of that gap here for you today, with lots of practical tools and tips that you can take away and utilize into your recruitment practice. So how many of you here today have had any kind of formal interview training? Normally, when I ask that question, the vast majority of people that are conducting interviews have never had any form of training whatsoever on what a great interview looks like, despite the fact our people are the most important aspects and elements of how we perform as a business, both culturally, both in terms of profitability, in terms of our ability to connect and reach the clients that we want to work with. So this part of what I do is a bit of a mission, and it's definitely my passion project, is to make sure that all line managers have the opportunity to receive some level of interview training. And actually, I'm with a couple of asset management firms next week, training their boards on exactly this subject. So these are some of the clients that we've worked with in terms of both on the recruitment side, but also on the training and development side. And as I say, that's very much a global offering. So from Asia to the UAE, Australia even. I'm actually flying out to Australia to deliver some training in November, which is hugely exciting. So I'm hoping that those credentials will mean that you feel that you're in safe hands today when it comes to understanding how to deliver a gold standard interview process. And to those of you that have just joined, hello and welcome. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you today. So there's three key things that I really want to cover today, and that is, why adopt behavioral interviewing? What is it? What needs to happen to deliver an incredible gold standard interview so that your PR machine is happening for you when that person leaves the interview? How do we get this put into practice in the easiest way possible? And as I say, this is something I often deliver over a couple of hours, but I'm going to bring together a snapshot of all that I think is most important for you to perhaps take away to your organizations today. So in terms of some statistics for you, and I thought we'd kick off today with a few stats because I just think it's quite interesting. So only 8% of interviewers surveyed had ever received interview training. And that survey was with over 600 of our clients. 75% of businesses have seen huge impact. We know the impact negatively of poor hiring. It can impact culture. We also know that most organizations spend 80% of their time with 25% of their poorest performers, and we should be flipping that on its head. We know that particularly over the last year, there's been a compromise in candidate quality in terms of hiring because of the pressure to hire and the shortage of talent. And we want you to stop having that lost productivity, the time, the effort, the investment. We want that to be placed in the best possible way. And this is what we're going to do for you today. And I'm really excited to take you on this journey. The interview is becoming absolutely critical in terms of your storytelling as an organization, in terms of attracting that top tier caliber, that caliber of candidates that's going to be a complete game changer for you competitively. And 9 out of 10 professionals say that a great interview experience literally can change a company that they had doubts about. A positive candidate experience can be the difference between you being able to receive or secure your top choice candidate or that of your competitors. And so employers are now paying a lot more attention to their candidate experience when it comes to interviewing. And the candidates are much more vocal about what that looks like. So I thought I would start today's session with some of the questions that come up the most in terms of what questions interviewers use, and the questions that I promise you after today's session, you're going to put to one side and welcome in some different sorts of questioning, because these questions, believe it or not, spark all our bias. They allow somebody to ingratiate themselves to us. They are particularly great questions for people that aren't necessarily telling the whole truth and that can embellish their experience and really sell themselves to you. But unfortunately, it doesn't give us a lot of actual information to go on from which we make a great decision. So I'm going to help you to understand today why these questions are no good for you in terms of hiring. And these questions I want for you to hire with your head and not with your gut. I used to be one of the worst offenders at saying, I've got a great gut instinct for people and hiring on that gut. However, what we're really talking about when we talk about gut is our ego and also who we like, who feels like somebody that, you know, we would be happy to go for a dinner with or something like that. And I think actually what we really want to be doing is we want to be hiring with the deep understanding and knowledge that that person is going to be able to come in and really perform in the role, really deliver against the benchmarks that you set for that particular position, for your organization. Do they have the right values, beliefs, drivers, motivators? Do they have you? They've proven that through the interview process. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So what the hell is the difference between structural and behavioral and unstructured interviews? Well, I would love for you to adopt behavioral interview questions. They are a much better way of securing the right person, and they are about between 70 and 90% more effective than unstructured interviews. So behavioral interviews are a structured interview process that focuses on gathering specific job-related, real-world examples of behaviors that the candidate has demonstrated within their previous experience. And because of its focus on their competency, behavioral interviews are brilliant at minimizing the impact of personal impressions that usually result in some level of bias during the interview. And as a result, highly subjective hiring decisions. So the real focus for us with behavioural interviewing is not only matching the candidate with the technical, specific and functional skills required for the role, but also ensuring that a candidate possesses the competencies for success in their role, specifically with you. There are tons of additional benefits. Research shows it's twice as effective as a minimum as unstructured interviews. It supports diversity, equity, and inclusion. It also helps ensure consistency, much stronger storytelling, better PR, has an impact on culture. It has an impact on performance in the role. It's legally defensible. And ultimately, past behaviour is the best predictor of future behaviour. So the challenge around unstructured interviews and the unstructured interview process is it often causes poor hiring decisions, can cause unfair hiring practices, and it can also lead to a really poor candidate experience. So tons and tons of studies have found that structured interviews are far more superior in hiring and produce much better results. There's a colossal difference in the validity and value of structured behavioural interviews compared to one that's unstructured. I'm going to really help you to understand what a structured behavioural interview looks like. Essentially, unstructured interviews are going into the interview, asking candidates things like, tell me about yourself, asking a few questions about a CV, having more of a conversational interview. And it's actually not really much better than flipping a coin. So we want something where you can take out all of the brain space, all of that energy that goes into interviewing in an unstructured way, and create something that you can really evaluate and assess and analyze. So let's have a look at a few of some of the results. So if behavioural interviews were used as a sole method for making hiring decisions, you could expect that about 90% of your hires would be successful on the job. So the data says it's 9 times more effective. And what we know is that the difference also means that hiring managers feel more confident, that hiring managers feel that they're able to deliver a much better candidate experience, that they're also able to assess individuals with far better veracity. And all of this means that you will become a much more successful organization. So what and how do we create a structured interview? What does that look like? So we are going to start off with a huddle. So you start your interview process with getting together with the people that are involved. You start to formulate your job description or edit or update your job description. You start to look at what questions are we going to use that are really going to analyze this person's ability to perform in the role. Who are we benchmarking against? We're going to ask the same questions to each candidate at each stage. And we're going to make sure that those candidates don't ask questions until the very end. We're going to be looking for star responses to those questions. So the situation, the task, the action, and the result. And we're going to assess those questions based on the evidence that they give in each of those different areas. So these questions, I can share tons of resources with you after this webinar. And even if you're listening to this on catch up and you're not able to join live, you can reach out to Lydia at any point for the resources and we'll share those with you very gladly. So all of this starts to create a structured process which is going to allow you to create a very different result as a byproduct of adopting this process. So we're ideally going to use a rating scale between 1 and 5, and I'm going to share that rating scale with you. So it saves you as an interviewer having to write lots of notes. It allows you to give people a score. And the fantastic thing about using a scoring system for your behavioural interview questions is it enables you to then start monitoring and assessing over the course of a year after you've hired that person to look at, okay, well, how is that person performing? What was their score at interview? And then for some of our clients that have adopted this, they don't have a level at which they don't hire below. So that might be 18 for you, it could be 22. And as a result of that, our interviewers are able to start to create this lovely piece of data that they can utilize to really empower them to make fantastic decisions moving forwards. So I'm going to just share with you a combination of McKinsey and as well as Frank Schmidt and John Hunter. So their research was for, they assessed over 85 years worth of interviewing data, 85 years worth. So they're definitely the guys that know their stuff. So even though their studies are a little older now, we know that from looking at McKinsey's more recent studies that it still stacks up. So actually the most effective way of assessing candidates is assessment centres. But if you're a small business like ours and like lots of the organisations we work with in Dubai, then assessment centres aren't realistic. But guess what? The fantastic thing is the next most effective way is skillful, structured interviews. Now, if you combine that with work sampling, so at the moment, for example, Lydia's working with somebody where they're a small boutique private equity firm, and we're looking after some hiring for them at the moment in their PA team. And their particular team is using a work sample that we've put together for them, which is assessing their written skills, as well as we've advised them on some really fantastic structured interview questions that are behaviourally based to ask those individuals. And we know they're going to get an amazing result at the end of that process. The next one is actually personality assessments. So your psychometrics, they are less as effective as ability and work sampling tests. It's quite interesting, that one, because we still use psychometrics here and we're qualified to deliver those. Unstructured interviews right down there towards the bottom, followed by references, because who are you going to give as references? Well, you're going to give somebody that gives a great reference. And then no surprises there. If you're into astrology or graphology as a means by which to assess your candidates, you're going to get pretty much zero result on that in terms of performance. So when we give you this lovely structured program, which again, you can reach out to Lydia for, we can give you a really neat structure. You only need to ask about 5 or 6 of these behavioural interview questions, maybe even 4 or 5 is enough, plus some technical questions. So it increases productivity, lower turnover, higher morale, builds better culture, and it's basically a much stronger service to all stakeholders, because it takes out all of the energy and the effort into somebody suddenly grabbing a CV, walking into interview thinking, what am I going to ask? No, it's all set up for them. So I'm a bit of a geek, and so I love reading papers and research. And one of my, I guess, my talent acquisition heroes is Laszlo Block. He's written a great book on hiring. He was the lead talent acquisition professional at Google for many years, took them from 30 people to 5,000 people and beyond. Probably one of the best in the world. He's got an amazing talk actually on YouTube on exactly this. And then another that I absolutely love to follow is Jerry Kang. He is a UCLA law professor, and both of them talk about the fact that we all of us have an ego. And what tends to happen a lot with interviews is we walk into the interview, the person smiles at us, perhaps they've been to a similar school, or maybe they've worked at another company in Dubai that you really respect, and immediately we think, yes, this person's given me a great first impression. They've worked for someone I know. Oh, an even bigger bonus, we both love to play golf. So tick, tick, tick. And as a result of that, we spend the whole of the interview looking for proof that we're right because of this pesky thing called the ego. And it allows us to ignore lots of the evidence or red flags or perhaps lack of evidence around behavioural interview questions. And so as a result, we treat that person how we've perceived them to be. So we will elevate them. And this is the problem with structured interview process and unstructured interview process. We know that things like our perception of physical beauty, expressiveness, conversational rhythm, all of these things have an impact. If we've just had a row with our business partner, or perhaps our romantic partner, or we've just received an email that's really, perhaps sort of really irritated us, if we don't know how to regulate, then unfortunately all of these things can also negatively affect the interview. So we need to be aware of our ego. We need to be aware of our unconscious biases. And all of our unconscious biases come from direct experience with other people, events, situations, and actually most of those, interestingly, most of our biases are actually caused by vicarious experiences. So people, stories, books, movies, media, culture, and more. But we often miss out on the best person for the job because of this. And that's what we don't want you to do, or have that, lost opportunity and lost talent. So what does it take? What does it take to be a gold standard interviewer? Well, it takes superb communication skills, takes active listening. A brilliant way to help train yourself to become an active listener is to summarize back. And what I mean by that is so say I was asking Lydia here a question and she responded to that question, I would just say, so let me just understand what you're saying is X, Y, and Z. Have I understood that correctly? That's a brilliant way to train. The another way to really demonstrate great active listening skills is to nod. And to really train yourself to listen to understand rather than to respond. And being absolutely present is a skill that all great interviewers have. So if you ever work with an executive coach, and I've myself have done the training to become an ICF coach, and I really learned that presence is actually really hard. We have up to some 90,000 thoughts a day. Most of those are on repeat. And so as a result, being present takes skill. For me, what I do when I'm in an interview is I try and imagine that I'm in a bubble with that person, and anything that pops into my head that's not related to really listening to that individual, trying to understand, I just allow it to float out the bubble, because it's inevitable. It's going to happen sometimes. Oh, I missed that for dinner tonight. Oh, I've got that person I need to email. All of these things are just human. They're completely normal. But I absolutely actively allow that thought to leave the bubble that I'm in. Great interviewers are well prepared. They don't just walk into the interview straight off the back of another meeting. They allow themselves at least 5 minutes, 10 minutes ideally, but at least 5 to 10 minutes to make sure that you can get centered, let go of anything that's not going to serve you in that interview process. Make sure that you've read through the CV, that you've obviously got your pre-prepared questions that you're going to ask, and just acknowledging that self-awareness around things that could distract you, things that sometimes that you would allow somebody to perform less well in because they've got X, Y, or Z experience. And the big thing is that we leave our ego at the door. There's a great Harvard assessment on biases. If you ever want to do it, it's called the implicit association test. There's loads that you can attempt online. Harvard's got a free one. It's quite interesting to do. And we all have bias. Nobody on the planet, because we are built for survival, and and part of survival is belonging to groups. And so Harvard IAT is great to help really for us to understand, what does our own bias look like? So we want to create a great interview process, right? So how do we do that? Well, we want to be able to impart to that individual that's in that interview the bigger vision for the company, the smaller vision for the team that they're going to be involved in. So how does that team connect to the bigger vision? We want to be able to share the company values, the team structure, and really be able to share with them that sense of their 30%. So what I mean by that is most people leave jobs because they're looking for 30% more impact, influence, ability to use skills. And so all of those things, we want you to be able to really translate in a powerful way, and it will make a very big difference. So what should we all be looking for? Well, according to McKinsey, there are 5 key pillars that every single role that we recruit for, we should focus on understanding that person's capability around. So the first one is coachability, the ability to accept and implement feedback. So we all know that sometimes we have team members where we give feedback, and instead of people using that for rocket fuel, they use it to mean something negative about themselves, or become highly emotive and have an inability to accept feedback. We need people that are coachable in our businesses, because we want to be able to somebody to continue to evolve, to grow, to create impact. So that's your first pillar. The second is emotional intelligence. So the ability to understand and regulate our own emotions without taking people down that river with us, and the ability to accurately assess and appropriately respond to other people's emotions. That ability to understand that we all have an impact on others and understanding how we can best respond to each other. Accountability and problem solvers. So we do not want people that give us problems. We want people that come with ideas and solutions. Motivation is a huge one, especially if you have people perhaps that are working in a remote or hybrid way, is motivation, the sufficient internal drive to achieve our own potential and excel in the role and not expect somebody else to create that for us. The temperament. So this is the attitude and personality suited to that particular role and work environment. So at times that temperament, you might need somebody that's more reserved, or you might need somebody that's more outgoing, or more A-type in personality. So somebody that's got that right temperament, the right motivators, the right sense of personal accountability, strong EQ, and a strong sense of wanting to use feedback as career rocket fuel over and above something that means something negative about that individual. So we need, ideally, to start getting really conscious about giving every candidate our fair and unbiased attention, making sure that we really put our emotions in the parking lot. I mean, Lou Adler, and if you haven't read Hire with Your Head, I'd really recommend it, is trying to make sure that you give yourself some processing time before and after the interview. We want to make sure that at the same time, there's a brilliant article actually also, just while I think about it, by Martha Lane Fox, who is the founder of lastminute.com, and also happened to be the youngest member of the House of Lords at the age of 40. She gave some great advice about hiring people, and hers was after numerous mistakes, and she was just saying that gut instinct is just such a poor way to hire people, and use her experience as a learning curve, and make sure that you have this rigorous interview process. Take your time and really choose the people that you get to know on an evidence-based approach. And that article was in the FT. I don't know whether you're going to be able to locate it, Pippa. I can find it afterwards if not. So we started to touch on the active interview, making sure that we're listening to understand and not to respond. So reflecting back the words, thoughts and feelings, asking more questions, letting them know you've heard by words like, okay, I see, or or recapping or summarizing what that person is sharing, making sure that we give that person our full undivided attention. And just getting really present. And one of the ways that we can do that is either just through things like breathing, breath work, whatever works for you. Just feeling your feet on the ground or your sit bones in your chair can really help to get fully present. So body language, we want to get the best out of our candidates. We want to make sure that those candidates have the best possible experience. So a little adjustment allowance at the beginning of their interview, allow them to settle into their new setting, make sure they've got what they need, whether that's water, pen, whatever it might be. Just give that person a minute or two just to settle. And then ideally, we want to be like Sweden. We want to be neutral in our body language, again, so that person really feels safe, comfortable, and able to deliver the best version of themselves in that setting. We know that there are certain characteristics and certain people that perform particularly well at interviews. So A-type personalities, individuals that are might have narcissistic or dark triad traits, so Machiavellian, narcissistic, and I can't remember the third. Psychopathic, I think the dark triad is, but actually those people perform particularly well at interviews because it's a performative setting. So what we want to make sure is that we don't miss out on brilliant talent, and we're creating a really nice, pleasant setting for that person to operate within, basically. We want you to have talent that brings something extra. So this obsession around cultural fit means that we often miss out on culture add. So we want to understand what that person is going to bring to your culture that you haven't perhaps or don't currently have within your organization. Is that person a different kind of vision setter? Does that person have a particular passion for, I don't know, it could be a hobby or an interest or a skill? Does that person learn in a specific way? Does that person, what do they have to add to your culture? So ask that question, ask the question, you know, share with me what you would add to our culture, rather than how you would fit with our culture. And what you'll find from that, particularly learning about those person's passions and how they might apply that to a work environment, is to really understand what someone might have to bring and how they might be able to grow your organization in a certain direction. So some of the ways that you can produce, and I know this is a lot of information in a very short period of time, but some of the ways that you might be able to introduce the best possible candidate experience is to send out a written confirmation around exactly what that person can expect from your interview process. We do that for all of our candidates here, for example, and making sure that those candidates know each step, what happens next. In the introduction of the interview, we should be explaining that what will happen in that interview process and be specific. Let them know that you're going to ask them 5 or 6 behavioral interview questions, some technical questions associated with the role, and that they will then have an opportunity to ask you any questions at the end of the interview. And give clear instructions on what you're expecting from that candidate. You know, so perhaps I will be asking you a work-related situation question. I'll probably be asking you 4 or 5 of those. I'd really like you to be specific around your behaviors, meaning what you did in that situation and what that led to. And there's nothing wrong with giving some feedback during the interview itself. Let the candidate know, thank you, I've got enough information, or that you would really like them to elaborate on something specific so that you have that information to hand that you can then assess. And we tend to recommend that you perhaps look at either 2 parts of the interview in one, or that you look at 2 different interviewers focusing on 2 different areas. So the hard skills, so having more task-orientated questions, and then perhaps the softer skills, which is around culture add, EQ, drivers, values, behaviors, those kind of areas can help separate the 2 out. With these 3 interview stages of the interview process, we want you to make sure that you have the ability to attract the right candidates. And believe you me, even a candidate that leaves, that isn't successful with your organization, if they have had a great candidate experience, they will be telling people about that. If they get great feedback that they can use to improve, again, they're going to be telling people about your organization and the really positive experience that you've had. And we want you to have the ability to really assess. So this is using that rating scale that we discussed, I'm going to share with you shortly. And then also the decision process, making sure that if you're working with an agency like ours, do they conduct background checks like we do? Do they make sure that that person doesn't have any adverse social media or anything that could impact your organization moving forwards? All of those aspects are really important so that by the time you make that offer, you have this incredible package of information. Their background has been screened, great questions have been asked, so you really understand how that person's going to operate. Perhaps you've added on a task-related assessment, a job-related assessment, and that way, again, this is going to really, really help you. And these are some of the questions that we thought. So Lydia's recently been working with a large property developer in Dubai, and they asked for some interview questions, and we thought we'd share some of those here with you today, just to give you a little insight. And again, reach out to Lydia if you're looking for some interview questions that are great to ask. She'd be delighted to support you with those. So here are some of the questions that that Lydia shared with her client. And we just thought that it'd be really interesting for you to see a snapshot of what some of those look like. All of these questions are assessing the person's ability to deliver in the role associated with what's needed in terms of skills, capability, values, drivers, behaviors. And all of these are looking for tangible evidence of past examples of how they've demonstrated or how they've operated with these particular behaviors or particular values. These were very specific to the client that Lydia was working with in terms of questions that they'd asked for. But we thought they'd be useful just to give you a little insight today in terms of perhaps what you might want to look at for your behavioural structured interviews moving forwards. And these were some of the last ones, and this was, a lot of these were around how this person operates in terms of their EQ in the environment they work in, and also around productivity. And I know there's lots of questions at the moment, is how do we monitor performance in a way that feels empowering? And it's a hot topic of debate at the moment. Now, there is something that's important. Just asking one question isn't quite enough. What we want to be able to do is to probe into those questions. And again, we're sharing some of the probing questions that Lydia put together for her client. And these are some of the areas that that we would suggest, or some of the questions that we would suggest you use when a candidate's given you an answer, is to really explore, because the more we probe, and obviously you know 2 or 3 of these, 1 or 2 is also fine. The more we probe, the more we can understand how somebody will operate, and also get all the information that you really need, and to make sure that what they're sharing is true, that what they're sharing is honest, and that they have a high level of integrity. So the 30% stretch is the bit that I think is most important, is where is that person's ability to create impact? Well, how will that person grow? What will be the main challenges in that role? And we need to make sure that we as interviewers are sharing, and this counts for me too when I'm interviewing for C&C, is how as an interviewer am I making sure that that person understands how they fit into the bigger vision, the bigger mission, the bigger goals of the organization? How does that role matter? And how will we commit as an organization to their own development, to making sure they have the capacity and the capability to utilize all of their skills and bring them into the role? And you know, if you've got questions on any of these aspects, let us know. Pop them in the Q&A. Is there anything that you'd like to understand a little bit more about? Please do please do let us know. So Lydia's rating scale is here, and this is what she's been working with some of our clients in Dubai more recently, and it's so super simple. You've picked out your 4 behavioural interview questions, so you've come in, you've introduced what the interview is going to look like, you've checked that that person has what they've needed, you're going to let them know what the process is going to look like, and then you've kicked off with 4 or 5 behavioural interview questions before going into your technical questions, and then allowing the candidate to ask questions before you then go into sharing more around the team structure, the bigger goals, the stretch that's going to be there for the candidate, etc., etc. Couldn't be more simple, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Couldn't be more simple to use. And it just means that as you go through the interview, you're scoring that person, that the answer to that question was a 2, that was a 3, that was a 4, and then comparing exactly the same to every single other candidate that is in that part of the process. So I've just mentioned the process itself in terms of what gold standard looks like. Again, we can share this with you, and this is just simply so that if you are looking to adopt a new structure or a new process, you can keep it super, super simple. And this is the kind of process that you can use that has worked time and time again for the clients that we respond to their needs for in terms of the interview process. Something else that we also do as an organization is, we sometimes will, especially in that first screening interview, we'll sit in with our clients if that's something that they need. Now, these are the little bits of the interview process that, again, is really important that we're all aware of, is that candidates matter, and they need to really matter in terms of front and center in that interview process. How are you making sure that that candidate experiences the best possible version of your organization? How are you making sure that they feel looked after and taken care of during that process? Because all of these things matter in terms of your PR, in terms of your storytelling as an organization, and in terms of what those individuals then decide to share externally. And we know that now more and more candidates are very motivated to share their responses. Not always fair, I know that, and sometimes can be hugely unfair, but it's the world we live in. You know, we live in a world where people can hide behind their computers and share whatever they like online. So we want to make sure that what they're sharing is fabulous when it comes to you and your organization. So some of the illegal job interview questions you will know all about. They tend to relate to any protected characteristics, so age, disability, etc., etc. So again, if you want any specific information around this, obviously we are not lawyers, and we are certainly not capable of giving legal advice, but we can certainly share with you some of the questions that perhaps are definitely best avoided if you want to make sure that you are completely protected in the interview process. So we're going to open up to any questions. If anybody has a question, you are welcome to ask. But just in terms of the tactics or tricks of asking great interview questions or elevating your interview process is get feedback from the candidates at the end of their process with you. How did you find our interview process? What would have improved that process? What could have made the difference between it being good and great? How could we have better supported you? And making sure that we're getting that feedback so that you can use that as the ability to continuously up-level, provide interview training internally, making sure that you're scheduling those kickoff meetings so that everybody is on track in terms of the questions being asked, in terms of what the process looks like, in terms of how the candidate's going to be treated during that process. And one of the biggest takeaways is that values fit over culture fit every time. Look at culture add, but look at that person's values and their behaviors to make sure that you are getting the very best possible person for the job. So in terms of today's session, that was a very brief whistle-stop tour of how to interview effectively. And I mean, Lydia, is there anything that you've sort of been hearing from your clients recently in Dubai that they're finding challenging around interviewing, or anything that you wanted to sort of share?
I think mainly for the sort of clients I'm trying is just attracting the right talent and the specifics of what they're looking for. What would you suggest to those who are hiring in terms of finding that really specific caliber of candidate that they're looking for?
Great question. I think I would, first of all, I'd recommend using a brilliant agent like yourself. But secondly, I would also making sure that job descriptions are fantastically detailed. So many people use old job descriptions or job descriptions that haven't actually been updated according with the values and behaviors that we're specifically looking for. Making sure that your adverts are written in a way that's going to attract the right caliber of person. Making sure that you're sharing storytelling around career opportunities, around perhaps your values, or perhaps making sure that you're highlighting individuals externally using LinkedIn or social media that have performed particularly well in that role and how they've done it. So it's a lot around storytelling, using the right people, knowing and understanding what those behaviors need to look like, and making sure that we're sharing that in the most effective way.
My other question being, how can we make our candidates feel more comfortable? I know you touched on it briefly, but a bit more about how we can make them really be themselves in an interview, whether is it sort of, you know, the surroundings or just even how we present to them ourselves. What kind of tips would you maybe suggest to us?
Great. That's another great question. Okay. Well, they call it adjustment allowance. And actually for all of us, what we don't want is huge amounts of cortisol pumping through our bodies just before we do an interview, because when we're nervous, we tend to talk quicker. We may not be able to think straight. We may not be drawing on the best evidence. So ideally, it looks like prepping the candidate beforehand. This is what's going to happen. These are sorts of types of questions that you might be asked. This is what's likely to happen in terms of the interview process. Let me share some details about the person that's going to be interviewing you. I mean, for us, we try and ensure that all of our candidates have everything from video content right the way through to written content, press releases, all the information possible so that person feels that they are set up for success. It is about environment too. So it's making sure that, you know, perhaps if you're sitting on a huge boardroom table, that you don't put somebody on one end and you sit on the other. It's little things like making sure that it feels that they're in a place where there is, where it's set up to make them feel comfortable. And I think letting them know that we want you to feel comfortable. What can I get you before the interview starts? Is there anything that would be useful to you right now? And then the big piece is actually as you explain how the interview is going to run, what happens during that stage is the candidate doesn't need to talk. So they're able to regulate a little bit, they're able to adjust, and they're able then to relax into the setting. And you're much more likely to get the true individual by making sure they do feel comfortable.
Brilliant. And we might have a couple of people here with us today or watching it back who might actually be on the other side and being the interviewee. What maybe 3 tips would you suggest to them to nail an interview?
Ask great questions.
Yeah.
So making sure that at the end of the interview that you are asking insightful, intelligent, well thought out questions. I think that's one of the things that lots of people don't do. And I think the second thing is to make sure research. You know, making sure that you go beyond the website, making sure that you're looking at press releases, that you're looking at recent developments, that you're looking at what their bigger mission or vision or goals might be, and seeing how your values and drivers fit in with those. And to prep really strong examples of your past experience so that when you are walking into an interview, you are able to really share the very best aspects of what you're able to deliver for that organization, in terms of the situations you've found yourself in, the tasks that you undertook, the actions as a result, and then the results, the impact that you made.
And then from, I suppose, everything we've discussed today, what would be then your 3 top 3 things to take away from this session today for those who might be hiring?
Yes. Okay, so my top 3 tips for anyone hiring in Dubai right now is to create a structure around your process. What are the stages in our process? What sort of questions are we going to ask at first and second stage? How do we assess our candidates? And what's every candidate's experience going to be here in our organization? And so for me, structure, create the structure. Reach out to us for all of our resources. We've got lots. So my second one would be to reach out to us or reach out to you specifically, Lydia, to obtain all of the resources. And then my third one is to try and ensure that every single person in your organization has some sort of interview training. And that in itself will really make a huge difference in terms of the success of the hires that you're bringing on board.
Do you have one more for you, Lucy? So
okay, last question.
Just thinking about it. How many stages would you say is too many stages? Or how many stages would you say for a certain level? In terms of an interview process, would you have 3, more, less? What would you recommend?
3 is perfect. 3 is the golden number. And also peer-to-peer, having peers in an interview stage is also really, really, really powerful. So when you have 2 people interviewing together, we tend to perform better because we've got a colleague with us. So I would say there's two top tips. One is that you ideally have 2 people interviewing together, and that you have no more but no less than 3 stages.
Brilliant. Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. Well, it's been lovely to be here with you all. It's lovely to start to get to know our Dubai clients better, as this is obviously a newer venture for us, having been super well established in London for so long. Lydia is here to support, to guide, to help, to add value in any possible way that we can. And I hope you've enjoyed today's session and you've got a lot out of it. And I'm really, really glad to hear it was insightful. Thank you. That's lovely to hear. And we'll look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thank you, Abby. Oh, that's great to hear, Abby. Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks, Bethan. Great. Okay, good. Good. We're really, really pleased it's been useful. Pleasure, Lydia. Absolute pleasure. Wonderful, Daniela. Thanks, everybody. Listen, have a great afternoon ahead, and we will speak to you all very, very soon.
And if you need anything, please do reach out. My email is in the chat box and also my LinkedIn. So if I can help with any hiring needs, just let me know.
Yeah, and you can absolutely have a recording of the session. We'll send that out to everybody after today, no problem, and with all of Lydia's contact details too. All right. Have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon, everybody. Take care, and we will speak to you all very soon.